Mr. Berry, thank you for taking some time to talk with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
You know, in the March primary election, you came out in second place in a four-way race, gaining about 35% of the vote, just behind former Austin City Council member Ellen Troxler-Claire's 38%. The candidate who came in third in this race turned around and endorsed Troxler-Claire. So I want you to tell voters why you believe you are the better candidate.
I ask people not to necessarily hear what I say, but look at my record. Look at what I've done as a public servant for the last 15 years as a police officer. I think it's very important to look at both of our times in the public alike. You know, former council member had some votes that necessarily may not have been some of the most favorable votes, especially to those of us in the law enforcement community. And so I challenge people to look at the difference between her vote record and my time as a police officer, as a public servant. I think that speaks volumes to not just my character, but also to how best I'm there to serve the community. You know, in law enforcement, you know, when I don't think there's much difference between being a public servant as a lawmaker, as a policymaker, or as a police officer, because we're there to solve problems. You know, when people reach out to us, whether it be a call for 911 for help, we're there to solve a problem. When people are calling your office because they need help with property tax relief or issues with their water supply, or, you know, worrying about infrastructure issues, those are things right there that as a lawmaker, you're there to look at how do I find a solution to a problem. And so to me, I don't think there's much difference between the two. And I think my time in public service really sets me up to be the better candidate, because I'm really focused on how do we solve a problem rather than maybe trying to find ways to just spin it this way or spin it that way rather than address the issue.
You know, you were the Republican candidate for House District 47 back in 2020, winning that primary runoff. Now, Democrat Vicki Goodwin ended up winning in the general. Then we had redistricting that came along, right? And essentially it made this new District 19, which includes a lot of more rural areas. District 19 used to be East Texas. Now it's way over here in Central Texas. Sometimes rural interests clash with urban interests at the Texas Capitol. So I want you to talk to us about how you, as an Austin police officer living in an urban area, how are you going to represent the interests of those rural District 19 voters? I
think that's a great question. And actually, if you look at how I ran that race when I ran in 47, we spent a lot of our time actually focusing on the smaller communities like Lago Vista and Bee Cave and Lakeway and Spicewood. We spent a lot of time listening to their issues, their concerns, their needs, because they haven't had a voice. And one thing that you find out in the rural communities that we're trying to be the representative for, there's a lot of the same feelings. Is how do I know you're going to give me a voice? How do I know our issues are going to be heard? And so it's because of that is why I think that we're better set up to be the better representative for these smaller communities. You know, out there, some of the big issues they're focusing on really are a lot of public safety issues. You know, we're dealing with, they want to have a secure border. There are concerns with some of the illegal immigration that's taking place because it's impacting some of the property owners out there. They're worried about the fentanyl that's coming through. I can't tell you how many times you hear of a fentanyl issue taking place in a lot of these counties. And so there is a lot of similarities that are going on out in the rural areas that, you know, my time in law enforcement has set me up to actually have some knowledge of some of these issues of what's going on and where the policy failures are to help improve and make things a little bit better for the community.
So what do you believe is the most pressing issue for the residents in District 19 right now?
You know, a lot of it's coming down to is everyone's getting their property tax bill right now. So you're hearing a lot of calls about, I'm being taxed out of my house. You're actually hearing that. It's no longer, I may be taxed out of my house. You're now hearing the conversations, I will be taxed out of my house. I am going to have to look for a place to move, but then where do I move to because I can't afford anything else? So you're hearing that not just in Austin, but you're also hearing that in Kendall County. You're hearing that out there in Burnett County. You're hearing that out there in Gillespie County and Blanco County. There are real concerns about the growth and the rise in property values and the ability to afford the taxes that are coming with that.
So now I think that that's interesting. As an Austin police officer, obviously police take up the biggest chunk in Austin of the city budget, but do you think local spending needs to be reined in even more? It was done, you know, somewhat in 2019 during the legislative session with the change in the rollback rate. Do you think it needs to be reined in more?
Of course. I think it really comes down to looking as where our spending's going. You know, I think that a lot of it can really look at is the stuff that we're spending money on. Take the city's response to the homeless crisis taking place. They've pumped, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars dealing with, you know, 9,000, 10,000 people, but they haven't moved the needle. But we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars on this. And now you're hearing the latest conversation with Project Connect. and how that bill has suddenly doubled, and everyone's gotten their property bills, especially renters that didn't think they would be impacted by that. Renters are now realizing what really happens. Their landlords that are the property owners, their bills went through the roof. It now trickles down into their rent. So it flows downward. So now renters are experiencing this. So it really comes down to the priorities of the city. What are they really? In investing in those things that are for the greater good for the majority of our community, rather than looking at these 1 or 2% issues and pumping so much money into there. And you're ended up harming people. Because I know that's not the interest of policy, is harming your constituents and the people that live in your community. But when you have people that are being taxed out of their houses, that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, that point you made about, Project Connect and the homeless, great points if you were running for Austin City Council, but you're running for, a wider jurisdiction, running for the state. How is the state going to impact that local spending on that level?
Exactly, and that's where the two issues are kind of one and the same, right? The state also has issues. That's where the philosophy of what I'm talking about is important, because that philosophy at the local level is important at the state level, because at the state level we also have to do our part too and look at how are we spending our money, how are we spending the taxpayers' dollars, are we spending in areas that are helping improve people's lives, helping improving their affordability, help improving access to clean and available water. All these different issues that are going on that are important. Are we investing wisely in there? Or are we just throwing money out there just to throw money out there and causing people's rates to go up? And that's what I'm talking about, is we need to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money, making sure we're investing those dollars where they're meant to be. Things like public safety, things like infrastructure, things like our public schools. Make sure that we have the things that are setting our youth and our families up for success in life.
So affordability, biggest issue you believe for people in District 19. What about the rest of the state? What do you think on a statewide view is the biggest issue impacting Texans?
I think right now, hands down, is the border. I know hands down it is the border issue is a driving component of it. I've gone down the border several times myself to see it firsthand. I didn't want to just take everyone else's word for it. Went down there firsthand, and very proud to actually have earned the endorsements of the United States Border Patrol Council, the Texas DPSOA, the Game Wardens Association. All the frontline workers that are working on the border right now, earning their endorsements means a lot, because we really took the time to understand the issues that are happening down there and seeing how it's transpiring beyond just the border and into the local communities and across the nation.
Talk to us then about Texas's role when it comes to the border, right? Because it has become a contentious issue, not just between Republicans and Democrats, but between Texas and the United States government. And this is not just under, President Biden. There were, folks in Texas politicians would say the border still wasn't secure under President Donald Trump. So talk to us about what role Texas should be taking then, you think, in the border.
I think Texas has a vital interest in making sure we have a secure border, and we definitely stand with what Governor Abbott's trying to do down there. This really is a national issue because it falls in that purview, but when you have the federal government being derelict in their duties to keep our nation safe and securing our border, what is the governor of Texas supposed to do? What are we as elected officials, what are they supposed to do when they take an oath to keep their community safe, to make sure that their nation and their state are safe and protected? What about those interests? So their oath doesn't just stop because, it's a national issue. Well, when you have the body of government that it is their responsibility, derelict in their responsibility, you can't have the governor of Texas abdicate his duties. And so I think when they force the hands of those of us here in Texas, we got to take care of Texans as well. And so I think what you're seeing down there is the first step of just trying to mitigate it. And you're seeing some help, because one thing that I found very interesting when I talked to the Border Patrol agents down there, they said, hands down, I quote, President Trump's policies worked. Our border was more secure under him. They helped. I found that very enlightening. They also said that what Governor Abbott is trying to do is helping. They said that right now some of their big issues they're facing are the illegal crossings going on. Well, what people don't realize, it's done in different ways. You have the first wave of people that are coming in, doing self-surrenders and being released to the community. You have another group that come in that are smuggling narcotics and firearms and cash. And then you have another group that are your high-risk threats to the community. These are your child molesters. These are your murderers and your rapists. And they all coming through at different points along the border. And so that's why it's spreading out. You overwhelm one component to open up a hole in the other component. And that's where all the security threats are coming in at. And that's why a secure border is important. It's not saying we want to deter people from coming here illegally. It's just saying we need to screen people, so we're making sure we're getting people that are coming here that have been vetted, so we can keep those that will cause problems in our community from not doing just that. We don't need to create another victimization out there, another child to be victimized, another person be hit and killed by a potential drunk driver that's not here legally. We don't need those problems out here. We have enough to deal with as it is. And so it's finding a way of having a legalized system that is respected and worked. And I think you're seeing the same thing. You're seeing Mexico now realizing the importance of it too. They're doing their part finally to try to make sure that the border is secured, because they understand it's a delicate relationship that it's a two-part system. It only works when both sides are doing their part.
But the challenge, I think, for state officials and for like our DPS troopers and our National Guards soldiers that are down there now is they don't have the jurisdiction to enforce those federal policies. So again, it's what is Texas's role?
Yeah, and that's where there's a lot of state laws come in. You know, we have state laws that are on the books that are being enforced, and that's where you're seeing the state enforcement coming in, because there are some state laws that are on the books to make sure they do that. And you know, there's also something too that talking with Border Patrol on, and it's something that I'm in support of, it's finding ways, can we give them dual authority to where we can give Border Patrol to also have the same ability to enforce state law along the border region. Because in talking with them, that's one of their big issues. They're seeing the same problems that we're seeing with our own district attorney here, where the U.S. district attorney isn't accepting the charges. So if one of their border agents is assaulted by someone, they're just dismissing the charges. Well, we're doing the same problem here in Travis County with our DA. And so you see a lot of similarities of what's going on. And so, but we do know there are local DAs down there that will take the charges and will hold people accountable that are breaking the law down there. And so we're looking at some systems like that to help them out. Another thing that they asked for was more boat patrols. And you're seeing Governor Abbott do just that. They're providing additional boat patrols down there, which was a request of a lot of the border agents down there, because they saw that it worked. They would go see 1,800 crossings a day down in McAllen, a day. Well, when there was boat presence down there, it deterred the crossings and they got down to just one. And you're seeing what's happening now. The numbers of illegal crossings are shrinking now that both Mexico and here in Texas are doing their parts to basically slow down the numbers of illegal crossings taking place.
You know, you mentioned your time on the border. Talk to us, though, about the morale, because, you know, yes, I think the federal agents down there would like to have some help, but our National Guardsmen have even told us here at KVUE morale is very low. They don't feel like they're doing anything, particularly under Operation Lone Star, that they are just kind of standing there as deterrents. We know that the report came out about some of them being sent to ranches that were hours away from the border. Do you think this is really a good use of state dollars?
I do. I do think it's good use of state dollars. And listen, I get their frustration. I mean, we have our own morale issues here with our own agency with stuff's going on. The morale issue is happening because everyone's in agreement. We shouldn't be having our local resources, our state resources down there, because it's a national issue. It's the job of the President of the United States, the job of the Department of State to keep our state and nation safe. So yeah, people are frustrated, and rightfully so. They should be frustrated, because they shouldn't be down there having to do these things. But because, like I said earlier, the governor has a duty to fellow Texans to keep them safe and to keep our border secure and to protect them from things that are taking place, that they're down there. So yes, it's understandable people's morale is hurting. It's understandable that they're frustrated. Who doesn't blame them? I don't blame them one bit. I'd be frustrated too if I was having to be down there and away from my family. I empathize with that. And again, it goes back, we need the federal government to step up, to start doing their jobs, so we can start letting our troopers go home, start letting them patrol their communities again, letting our National Guardsmen go back to their normal lives again. That's what we need to get back to. And there's only one way to get back to that, and that's when President Biden and the federal government decide to start upholding their oath and start fulfilling their duty to keep our communities safe.
You know, I want to go back to the Capitol, talk about the state legislature just a bit. They're coming off the most conservative session, I would say, in recent history, from election legislation to abortion to what is taught in Texas public schools. Do you think the legislature is moving in the right direction after those sessions of 2021?
I do believe we are. You know, and it's going to be contentious, right? Some people are going to feel no, some will say yes, but I personally feel we are moving in the right direction. You know, I want to get back to the direction in government where we're able to finally focus on the boring stuff, like securing funding for roadways, making sure that our farmers and ranchers have what they need to continue to provide a stable food supply chain issue. All the stuff that you don't hear about all the time, but yet unfortunately we're having to address these other issues because it is impacting the future of it's impacting our kids, it's impacting the future of our stuff. The curriculums, the things that are being taught in our schools aren't aligning with what a school should be doing. Schools are not a place for social justice learning. Schools are a place for academic learning. It is in your household, amongst your families and your peers, is where you learn the norms of society of what is just and not just, and what is right and not right. That is the ability of your parents and your family and your friends to learn those things. In school, we should be setting you up for success in life. How do we make sure that you know how to read at your proper grade level? How do we make sure that you're focusing on a thing like learning a trade skill? Maybe this student's not going to go off to college or join the military, but they're really good with their hands. Make sure that they have learning opportunities to have a trade that will set them up for success in life later on. That's what we got to work on. One of our biggest issues that I think we really need to tackle this next session is our workforce. Our workforce right now, from teaching staffing to police staffing to just even the local small business owner that's struggling to stay in business because they can't get people to work for them, those are real issues that we need to be focusing on and addressing this next session. And so hopefully we can allow for that to take place and get away from some more of these other things going on, because hopefully people will start doing the right thing and realizing, you know what, maybe it's time we just start focusing on the things that are setting our people up for success. I will control my household. I will do my independent job to be a good parent and raise my child the right way that I see fit, rather than trying to go into a school, interject stuff on a handful of students at the whims of one or two people. That's not the place for that. So you see policy having to get implemented and put into place when you start seeing these things, these fringe issues start getting infused into the political arena. We need to get back to focusing on these other things, but we can't do that when you start having these fringe issues popping up. So hopefully everyone kind of wakes up and realizes we have things at stake. I just left the meeting today where we were talking about water issues and water supply, water availability, and learning about what that's taking place. That's a huge issue out in the Hill Country, but it's not an issue that's ever talked about. And so, you know, we need to get back to those things because we do have some other serious issues that we need to focus and address on this next session.
You know, you want to focus on meat and potatoes, but you also made some interesting points about what I would say are some social issues. You say, for instance, when we're talking about classrooms, things that are creeping into the classroom, but there are no classrooms in Texas that teach critical race theory. They weren't teaching it before. The author of the bill even noted that. So it almost seems as though, and you would have some people who say we are making things issues that are not currently.
So I looked into that, and one thing I found is it's independent teachers taking it upon themselves to teach these things. That's one of the things that I've discovered looking into this issue some more, is you have independent teachers that are finding ways like D&I and other stuff to talk about this stuff, to subject kids to these things. And that's where you're seeing the flare-up taking place. And so as long as that continues to keep happening in there, parents do get concerned. Because as a parent, when you see that your kid's coming home with something because one single person took it upon themselves to do this, that parent rightfully is going to assume that's the curriculum because that's what's being taught. Because the teacher's supposed to be teaching to a curriculum.
But Justin, is that a local issue or is that a statewide issue?
It's a statewide issue because it's not happening in just one school. It's not happening at this school, this school. It should be handled at a local level. The superintendent should have the ability to handle and discipline when necessary in those issues and correct those issues. But the problem is it's not. If it was a local issue, you'd only see it happening in one school district, but you're not seeing it in one school district. You're seeing it in multiple school districts across the state, and that's what's making it the state issue.
Interesting. But meat and potatoes
is where I'd like to be at.
Meat and potatoes. All right.
Solutions-based governance.
I will have to say that we do have to note that you are one of 19 Austin police officers indicted for actions taken during the 2020 protests after the deaths of George Floyd and here locally Michael Ramos. Your specific indictment is related to shooting a beanbag round at a protester by the name of Kristen Wachowski. But there are 8 other officers also indicted for firing rounds at that exact same protester. So I am just going to ask you, did you fire a round at this woman?
So because the criminal case is still ongoing, I'm not going to answer to any specifics of what I individually did or did not do. But I can tell you that when we responded out there, we responded to Highway 35. Everyone knows that Highway 35 is the major corridor to I call it Brackenridge, but it's changed to Del Seaton. It was pivotal. We have to keep that open. What about all the people that are on the highway? What about their rights to travel freely without obstruction What about their safety? So there's a lot of things taking place that led to the orders that we were given to clear the highway out. And a lot of people complied. When there were warnings given out over the helicopter and the announcements were given, there were people who complied and voluntarily left. But the ones that stayed behind and made the conscious decision to start throwing rocks at us, start throwing frozen water bottles at us, start throwing objects at us, and refused to obey the law, and instead engaged in criminal activity and did so in a violent manner by throwing those rocks and bottles at us and turning that then from a peaceful protest into a riot. Yes, we have a duty. We have a duty to keep all the other motorists safe. We have a duty to protect the property in this town. And we had to go out there and do our jobs that day. And I really look forward to when we can finally get a court date set, to all the light can come out and we can show this, because I think once people see the totality of the circumstances, the facts that actually happened out there, I think once people see that, they'll see that our actions were not only lawful, but also justified, and that we were and still are being politically persecuted by a district attorney who campaigned on sending cops to prison. He didn't campaign on sending bad cops to prison. He didn't campaign on sending criminal cops to prison. He campaigned on sending cops to prison. And I have a huge issue with that.
How does you pointed out there isn't a court date set. How does this looming situation, this looming indictment, no court date set, how does that impact your race? And what do you want voters to know about your potential to serve in this position if elected with this indictment over you?
And that's one of the challenging things, and again, that's why I keep going back to my firm belief this was a politically motivated indictment. You wait 2 years to just now do this, but yet you're able to dismiss all these other cases just 2 months after getting into office, but yet you wait 2 years, and you wait right as early vote is underway. And not only that, but somehow only my name gets released and leaked out on what's supposed to be a sealed document. It's things like that just add further my belief in the fact that this is a political indictment. And then you have our judge. The judge that was assigned to our case recused herself and apparently made statements that she thought this was politically motivated. So, it's hard to say, right? It's hard to say because I do know that a lot of the people out in District 19 are very firm believers in the rule of law. They're very firm in that. And so it's just hard to know, do they take the time and the due diligence to really look into what's going on with the indictments of myself and these other officers, or do they just take headlines for headlines values and run with that? So do I think it could impact this race? I do think it could impact this race. Which ways it impacted? I don't know. It just really depends upon what does that voter do. Does that voter decide to research this issue more? Or do they just go with the fact that, the headline says he's indicted, so he's a horrible person. So.
Do you think there does need to be changes within the police department and within policing just in general, in light, though, of some of the issues that people were protesting?
Oh, there's always issues. I mean, every session we come up, we find ways to improve our profession. You'll be hard-pressed to find an officer, that at least that I hang out with, that are like, nope, we're perfect. Nope, nothing needs to change. We're good. We're golden. We're always looking for ways to improve. And one of the things that I always go to is start at the entry gates. You got to start at our hiring process, because that is you're the gatekeepers of the next generation of police officers that come to this profession, that are entrusted with so much responsibility and so much authority. That is where our training is paramount to making sure we're pumping out and getting the good kind of officers we want in our communities. And so I think that entry level is where it really begins at, is how do we make sure we're recruiting and hiring the best people? And the problem we have right now, and I'll use myself as an example, I was one of about 1,800 officers that applied to Austin PD back in 2007. I was one of only 100 that were to be selected. Out of the 100 that got selected, about 85 of us or so graduated. But think about that. Nowadays, we can't even it takes us forever to get a class filled up. We're not seeing these 2,000 person applications pouring in. And then are they qualified applicants on top of that? And so that's where I go back to, is we really got to make sure that we have the ability to recruit the best and the brightest. And because from that, then you can be more selective in looking on people's merits and go, okay, this person's a qualified person. Let's give them the opportunity. This person's got some issues in the past. We need to pass this person. But if all you got is an applicant pool that's very small, and you have a growing city, like a boomtown city like we are here in Austin, well, you need to fill your police ranks up. Because right now, the trend we're heading at, we're still in the red. We're still at a negative. We're looking at projections right now that it may take approximately about 10 years to get our staffing numbers to where they were. Not to where they need to be, but to where they were That's a problem. And sadly, we're not the only police department that's facing staffing issues, let alone in Texas, across the nation right now. It's because people don't want to come in this job because they've been demonized. They've been told, we're the devil, you're the enemy. That's a big problem, because no one's going to want to come into work in this profession anymore if everyone views that profession as an evil profession. So how do you improve community police relations if your applicant pool is so small and you can't hire people that you know would come in there and be changers of that perception in the community, to go out there and show and rebuild trust and rebuild that image? It's a next to impossible task at the way we're going right now. And so that's where in order for us to have effective community policing, it's just that we have to work with the community together to do this. But if the community is against us in the sense of, well, you got groups out there demonizing a profession and demonizing what we do, and that's a problem. And it's a problem too if you have cops demonizing the community as well. That can also create a problem, right? That's where we got to find, how do we break through that? How do we stop that from further festering? There are people that have vested interest on us being divided and us being against each other and not working together. They have vested financial interest to some stake on keeping us divided. And one thing that I've always set out is, how do we improve this? And that's by listening to people, listening to the feedback of the community, making those internal changes and those recommendations, but also doing so in a manner that also doesn't set the community up for failure either. There are certain policies and certain things that we need in place so we can do our job safer, so we can keep the community safer. And again, it's that two-way street of being able to have that communication. But when communication breaks down, you see what happened May of 2020.
All right. If you make it past this May election and make it past the election in November, what's the first piece of legislation you file?
I think the first piece of legislation we filed is obviously working on things dealing with our property taxes and securing our border. Those are some of the two big items that we've got to get focused on.
Give me some specifics. What specifically would you file to address property taxes?
So on the property tax thing, I look at what's causing the problem. What's causing it? What I hear from everyone is, I got my appraisal value in. I got my appraisal value in. And when you look at it, when your appraisal values jumped 100%, there's an issue there. One thing that I'm exploring, and again, I still need to run it by economists and other people, but the theory that I'm working on right now is, well, what if we decoupled, what if we took away our property tax value from our appraisal value, and we looked at what would it look like if we went to the sales value? So it's a known number. So you know what your number is when you buy your house. You can plan for retirement. You can plan year to year. You can plan to stay in your house in the next 5 years. So right now when you talk to people, they're like, I'm already at the high end of my budget when I buy my house. And then you tell them, would you factor for the taxes that are going to go up and the appraisal that's going to keep going up? Like, no, I haven't done that yet. And you do the math, because their wages aren't increasing that much. And so that's the theory that I'm looking at exploring into, is what is the economic impact if we move to a system like that with our property taxes? Can we still take care of the needs of the state at the same time providing realistic property tax relief for our voters in our community?
I want you to share some final thoughts with our viewers about why they should elect you this upcoming election.
Yeah, first and foremost, one thing I've learned about running for office right now is you learn about so many different issues. I mean, there is a lot of different issues out there. It was a very eye-opening experience for me running last time and again this time. And one thing I ask people is, I would be honored to earn their vote, because a lot of people don't take the time to realize, what does a vote mean? When you tell someone I'm voting for you, what they're really telling you is, I'm entrusting you to make sure you're going to keep me safe. I'm entrusting in you that you're going to provide things for my family to be set up for success. I'm entrusting you that you're going to find a way to make sure my kids' school is improving and that they're focusing on the curriculum matters that are going to set them up for success in life. I'm entrusting in you that you're going to uphold the Constitution. I'm entrusting in you that you're going to not tax me out of my house. Think about that for a second. That weighs a lot. When you actually break down what does a vote mean, and you understand that, that's something that I hold very personally. When I've had people come up to me and said, I'm voting for you, Justin. To me, it's no longer, oh, got a checkbox, up, that's off the list, keep moving on to the next one. It's more than just that for me. It's literally when you look at people in their eyes and you look at their kids and you see the heartaches they're going through or the struggles they're dealing with or the ambitions and the future they hope to have. Am I, as a policymaker, going to be making decisions that are positively impacting my community, or am I looking at voting on issues that just, help get me by, or I can spin my way out of it, or maybe I benefit from this a little bit more? We need someone that's willing to understand what does a vote mean. And I think between myself and my opponent, I think I'm the better candidate because I truly understand what that means. I truly understand what it means to serve a community. I understand what it means to answer the hard questions. I understand what accountability means. And because of those things, because of my time as a police officer in serving a community like Austin that has high expectations of their public servants, such as our police officers, wants you to answer hard questions, not shy away from it, as seen by my presence here, that those are the same values that I'm going to take back to my future constituents. The same philosophies and principles that I've carried in conducting myself and my duties as a police officer, I plan on conducting and carrying the same way as their public servant in their voice as their legislator for House District 19.
All right, well, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you.